I'm here with Daniel and Peter Moloney, co-owners of Moloney Family Funeral Homes in New York. They have 7 funeral homes across Long Island, and during the pandemic, you both showed incredible leadership in the ways that you served families and led your staff. And so we're excited to talk to you today to share some of these life-altering experiences and inspire our readers about how to approach challenges to come. So certainly, without a doubt, New York City was hardest hit through all of this, and Long Island, and you all were facing it at the very beginning. So please share some of your personal experiences and how you thought about this and how you really approached the entire experience.
We didn't really know what we were getting into back in the beginning, at the end of March, beginning of April. We thought that it would be manageable. There would be we knew that it was going to be a situation, but we just didn't know how bad it was going to be. And then it became overwhelming. It actually just continued to go up, and we faced days where we really didn't know what we were going to do in terms of when it was going to end. And that went on for a couple of months. So it was a very challenging time for us and for our staff in particular. We were figuring this whole thing out on the fly, if you will. And we did very well. We feel our staff really came through in a great way. But we're certainly more prepared now for something like that if it should happen again in the future.
Well, communication was the key. We were consistently communicating with our staff, encouraging them, offering them the support they needed to provide excellent service for our communities. We served many families throughout that time, and we were very fortunate to have the staff that we had in place to be able to meet the needs of our families and create something that just wasn't there. So it meant a lot for the families, and because of our staff and communicating effectively, we were having meetings consistently through Zoom and through online and just emails back and forth. So the lines of communication were there, and we were able to put our best foot forward during the changing times that was happening right before our eyes. So we're very, very fortunate as a family and as a funeral home to be there for the community.
I mean, just continuing to operate was a challenge, and the emotional toll that I'm sure for each of you and your staff. How did you support the staff through that? Was there anything unique that needed to be done during that time?
A couple of things that we did was we did a virtual staff meeting where we actually went before a camera. Our staff was either at their computers or at home or wherever, and we were able to communicate with them. We talked directly to them about what the situation was, what needed to be done, and how we were going to do it. And we had prayers sometimes. We would all join together in prayer. It was a very emotional time. But our staff, again, as Peter said, really were the rock in all of us getting through this.
Communication was critical. I mean, it was almost, I would think, hour by hour, needing to say what was changing with the regulations, or maybe staff that might have been exposed or things like that.
Yes.
So internally, but also externally, did you all do anything different to communicate externally to the community about how funerals would look different right now?
Yes, well, we did. We reached out to the local news outlets to communicate to them what we were doing, what service offerings we had available. We instituted a family goodbye, so families were afforded the opportunity to come in and spend time with their family. Keep in mind, there were people in the hospitals that were alone. Family members weren't allowed to be in the hospitals. They would come to the funeral home and have that time that they needed. So it was a very, very difficult time. Much different than 9/11. 9/11, everybody came together. This instance, nobody could come together. So it was a very lonely, sad time for many, many families. And we could feel it.
Yeah.
So.
And after what the families were experiencing by not being able to see their loved one in the hospital and so forth, the value of that service, albeit as minimal as they would allow us, was incredible. And we've seen feedback from those families over the last few months about how they recognized the limitations that were put upon us and them, yet they still were so very grateful that they were able to say goodbye. It was a very difficult time. Very limited number of people were allowed to be at the funeral home, and it was a very limited amount of time at the funeral home. So with all those factors, you know, we go back to our staff and our funeral directors, and they, you know, did an outstanding job of understanding what these families were experiencing and how they, you know, would be able to work through it, and that we were going to be able to help them with that.
And you all did some innovative things. I mean, you all are both innovators through funeral service, therapy dogs, and the tribute center, so many things over the years. But you were innovating, I mean, on the fly, really, with things like drive-through funerals. So could you share a little bit about not only how did that go, but also how did you approach it? How did you think about it?
Well, what we did was we did a lot of open discussion and just brainstorming to come up with ways to be creative to meet the needs of the community. We set up some tents so we could have some outdoor ceremonies so that people could feel comfortable being around one another during this time. But then we also did the drive-through, and we offered up some solutions to families because people come to us with the problems, and we just offer this out. And it was very successful. We had some signage created, and we had some porticos available, so the weather held out for us in that respect. But it was very well received, and the families were very pleased with the opportunity for a sense of community, people to be able to get together and have that time and pay their respects, as little as that may seem. But it was, during that time, it was a very, very positive.
Incredibly valuable.
Yeah, valuable for the families. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, huge just to be able to spend some time with their loved one. As you said, many of them in the hospital weren't allowed in.
Right.
Yes.
And I know during that time, you know, we had conversations about what would work and kind of our input into that brainstorming. But how do you all stay ahead? Like, what are the things that you both personally do to kind of prepare yourself for challenges like this, but also stay ahead of the curve in terms of trends or ways to serve families?
Well, I think the key is being creative, being willing to take risks for the benefit of our families, and just thinking outside of the box a little bit, and you know, enlisting our management team. Right? We have a fantastic management team in place, and we have conference room that we get together and we talk about things to better serve and create a better customer experience within our funeral home. So that's the key.
Yeah, we also, again, we're open to input from our management team. Many of them have been with us 20 years, so they know our business as well as we do. And they come to us with ideas or suggestions, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. But I would also say that some of the thoughts come from our families themselves. We'll sit with a family and they'll come and throw something out at us that perhaps we didn't think of, and then we'll sit back and say, you know, let's see how we can make this work, or what can we do with this to meet their desire and need, and you know, and then maybe take from that and be able to offer that to other families.
It's really being consumer oriented, especially in a changing situation like that.
Yeah. Another key element for us too was our children, because they're from the next generation, and having them and their input, because through a different set of eyes, Dan and I, we look at things perhaps a little bit differently, a little bit more traditional, but their ideas and creativity was brought to the table as well, which is really, really helpful in meeting the needs of the consumer today, because you know, it's ever changing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technology acceleration during this time was huge, and you all have always invested in that.
Technology was huge during this, in us being able to deal with families over the phone, be able to do our work on the other end through computers, sending emails back and forth, even electronic death certificates. In New York State, 3 years ago, you didn't have electronic death certificates. You manually had to send somebody to the doctor's office. If we had to go through that experience, if we went through, it would have been horrible. It would have been really, really logistically a nightmare. So technology it's almost like technology was prepared for this, if you will. And it really made a big deal. It really made a difference. We were able to set up things such that families, when they did have to come to the funeral home, we would minimize their time there. Because again, people didn't want to come to the funeral home, so it would be 15, 20 minutes, come in, agree with what has been selected and drop off clothing, and they could go home, and then they would come back for their service. So we were very cognizant of the fear of families and people even wanting to come to the funeral home. And they were very receptive. We would say to them, you know, look, I'm going to take some information, we're going to talk about the service that you want, and then when you come in, it's just simply a matter of finalizing it. Whereas traditionally, we would have the family come in and sit with us and make arrangements as normal.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this learning with us, and the leader, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.